Priscilla thought time had already taken everything, the marriage, the music, the man. But when she stepped into Elvis's old dressing room decades later, the mirror still held his last words, etched in fading lipstick. What he wrote that night wasn't a love note. It was a warning, and it changed how she remembered him forever. Stay with this one, because what she found on that mirror might be the only unrecorded goodbye Elvis ever left. August 16, 2022. 45 years since Elvis Presley's passing. The Las Vegas Hilton's backstage corridor had been closed for decades, the same hallway where his laughter once rattled dressing room doors. Tonight, a small crew reopened it for a private anniversary tour. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Priscilla Presley walked in quietly, her steps slow, her breath steady. Behind her moved archivist Miriam Cole and hotel historian Eddie Ramos. Their gloves brushed aside dust that rose like ghost smoke. The room smelled of old leather, hairspray, and warm bulbs. Nothing inside had changed much since the 70s. The cracked chair, the vanity lights framing the mirror, a faded towel still hanging from the rack. Priscilla stood still. "It's smaller than I remember," she whispered. Miriam nodded. Everything shrinks when the noise stops. A thin layer of dust covered the mirror, muting its shine. Miriam leaned in to wipe it clean, then froze. Underneath the dust, barely visible, were letters. Faint, curved, almost shy. "Elvis," she murmured. "There's writing." Eddie stepped closer, flashlight steady. Probably stage notes from a stylist. But Priscilla's stomach turned cold. The looping handwriting was familiar, too familiar. She had seen it on birthday cards, on the edges of love notes tucked into guitar cases. Her reflection trembled inside the glass as she whispered, "He wrote that." The words glowed faintly under the light. The lipstick was deep red, smudged by time. Miriam stared. "Did you write it?" "Maybe years later." Priscilla shook her head slowly. "No, that's not mine. He used to—" She stopped herself, voice breaking. "He used to borrow my lipstick to write reminders. Thought it was funny." The room fell silent. Even the hum of the lights seemed to fade. Eddie cleared his throat. Could it have been written during his last Vegas run? She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the mirror, tracing each fading letter as if they were veins of memory. How can words survive when their writer doesn't? What happens when your past literally looks back at you? She leaned closer, hand trembling, breath fogging the glass. The letters sharpened beneath the condensation. It wasn't a lyric. It was a date. Miriam adjusted the lamp for a clearer view. Through the dust, one line stood out in faint red. August 14th, 1977. 2 days before he died. Priscilla's heart kicked against her ribs. "That's impossible," she whispered. "He wasn't in Vegas then." The crew exchanged quick glances. No one spoke. She stepped back, suddenly dizzy, tears pressing at her eyes. "After all these years," she breathed. "He's still talking." The mirror caught her reflection. Older now, softer, but still the woman he once sang to. And beneath that reflection, the red letters waited, half hidden under time, daring her to remember. The air inside the room thickened as the numbers came into focus. August 14th, 1977. 2 days before Elvis died. Beneath the date, a half-smeared line shimmered under the bulb light. "Don't let them change what's real." Miriam covered her mouth. Eddie whispered, "That's his handwriting. Same curl on the D." Priscilla didn't move. The lipstick hue was familiar, crimson muse, the shade she used on tour. Her voice trembled. "He was here, right before Memphis." The sentence rolled out like a secret exhaled too late. Eddie checked the clipboard. His last booked Vegas show was 76. There's no record of him returning. Miriam frowned. Then who wrote this, and why that date? Priscilla reached toward the mirror but stopped just shy of touching it. She felt the heat of the bulbs on her face, smelled the old perfume caught in the fabric chair. Every sense said he had just left. Was this message meant for her? Or for himself? What truth had he feared would vanish once he was gone? She whispered, "He always said fame was a disguise." Maybe this was him trying to wipe it off. Eddie pulled out his phone, scrolling through archived ledgers from the Hilton vault. His brow tightened. Wait, there's an alias listed that night. Aaron King. Checked in alone. Suite B12. Miriam's flashlight wavered. Aaron King. That was his middle name and his crown. The realization hit hard. He had come back in secret. He had left a message no one was meant to see until time itself revealed it. Priscilla felt her throat close. He didn't want another song, she said quietly. He wanted to be heard off stage. Outside the dressing room, thunder rumbled faintly over Las Vegas Boulevard. The storm lights flashed across the mirror, and for an instant the lipstick words looked fresh again. Bright red, alive. Eddie stepped back, shaking his head. If that's we just uncovered his final performance, and it's not music. It's truth. The room went silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. Priscilla whispered almost to herself, "Don't let them change what's real." The phrase carried through the air like a prayer. And then she looked down, realizing something else. Beneath the signature smudge, a faint outline of a fingerprint, caught in the dried wax. Her breath hitched. It's his. The mirror, the message, the mark. Everything aligned into one impossible truth. He'd been here, 2 days before the world lost him. The discovery hit like thunder. Elvis hadn't been gone from Vegas in 1977 after all. He had come back quietly under a borrowed name, and the mirror had kept his secret. Miriam and Eddie rushed to confirm it. Hours later, inside the Hilton's dusty archive room, Eddie laid out the proof. A printed reservation card from August 14th to 15th, 1977. The name written in blue ink, Aaron King. Room B12. The card was stamped paid in cash. Beside it lay a room service receipt. Black coffee, 1 Bible, and a charge from the hotel boutique. Lipstick, Eddie said softly, tapping the line item. Shade, Crimson Muse. Priscilla froze. That's mine. I wore it on stage, back when we toured. The air seemed to leave the room. He hadn't just written with any lipstick, he'd used hers. She whispered. He must have bought it after seeing me wear it. Her voice cracked. He used it to write that line. Miriam stared at the receipt. Why that message? Don't let them change what's real. It sounds like a warning. Priscilla looked down at the letterhead, her reflection faint in the glossy ink. It's something he told me once. Back when we were falling apart. He said, if I stop being me, don't let the world pretend that's love. The weight of that memory dropped like a stone. Eddie opened another folder, scanning an old bellhop log. There's more. He didn't come alone. There's a signature for a courier. Someone who delivered a small reel-to-reel case. The tape, the note, the lipstick, the date, all leading toward something recorded. Priscilla rubbed her temples. He was sending a message. One last try to make himself understood. Outside the archive window, sirens echoed faintly through the Vegas night. The strip glowed like a reflection of the past. Bright, loud, lonely. Miriam whispered. If he came back here, it wasn't for a show. It was for peace. The room fell quiet again. Dust floated through the lamplight like snow. Eddie leaned over the dressing room photos they'd taken earlier. Look here, he said, pointing at the mirror's frame. The wood looked uneven. There's something wedged inside this crack. They returned to the dressing room, flashlights trembling against the glass. Miriam slid a small screwdriver beneath the frame's edge. Something shifted. A folded hotel napkin slipped out and landed on the vanity table. Everyone froze. On it, written in smudged black ink, was a phone number. The edges were yellowed, the paper stiff. Eddie unfolded it gently. Area code, Memphis. Priscilla stepped closer, her voice just a whisper. He left his city behind, but maybe part of him never did. She held the napkin under the light, her thumb tracing the numbers. Can love leave fingerprints that time can't wash away? What was Elvis trying to protect, his truth or hers? The napkin trembled in her hand as she whispered, It's his writing again. At the bottom corner, faint but readable, was one more line. If they ask, tell Joe. The ink had bled, but the name was unmistakable. Joe Esposito. Eddie looked up. His road manager. Priscilla felt her pulse quicken. Then Joe was part of it. He knew. The mirror's mystery wasn't just words anymore. It was a trail. And somewhere down that trail waited the truth Elvis had tried to hide before the world stopped listening. The digits on that napkin pulsed under the light like a heartbeat frozen in paper. Priscilla held it gently, afraid one wrong breath might erase the ink forever. Eddie dialed the number. The line clicked, then fell silent. Disconnected, just static. But the area code wasn't random. It was Memphis. Priscilla whispered, Joe. Joe Esposito, Elvis's longtime road manager. The man who saw every backstage door and sleepless night. He had died in 2016, but his family still lived near Henderson. Within days, Miriam tracked down Joe's daughter, Angela Esposito, who agreed to meet in a small diner off Highway 95. The table smelled of coffee and history. Angela opened a worn folder of her father's notes. One page stood out, creased and taped at the edges. Across the top, written in Joe's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, Vegas, August 14th message recorded. Angela explained, Dad told me once that Elvis wanted to record something only one person was supposed to hear. He said it wasn't a demo. It was a confession. Priscilla sat back, her throat tight. He said anything else? Angela nodded slowly. He called it the real thing. Said it was too honest for the label to ever touch. Eddie leaned forward. Does the tape still exist? Angela hesitated. Maybe. When Dad passed, his storage went to auction. Some bootleg collectors bought boxes. Priscilla felt the familiar ache return. Every time she thought she'd buried the past, it resurfaced with new eyes. Eddie promised to search. For weeks, he combed through bootleg forums and collectors' lists. Then one late night, he found it. A low-res image of a reel labeled RT_77. Seller's note read, possibly unreleased Elvis rehearsal. Unknown content. They tracked the tape to a private collector in Reno. After tense calls, the man agreed to let them listen under strict terms. No copies, no leaks. The next day, in a quiet studio, the reel was placed onto a vintage player. Miriam pressed record on her notes. Eddie dimmed the lights. Static filled the speakers. A slow, heavy hiss. Then, faint breathing. A stool creaked. And a voice. Raspy. Fragile. Unmistakable. Don't let them change what's real. The tone was weary, more man than myth. A soft strum of guitar followed. Uneven. Almost trembling. He was singing, but it wasn't a show. It was a confession. Elvis Presley, Miriam whispered, eyes wide. This is him. The words came slower now, wrapped in breath. Don't let them make it all shine. Don't let them call it love if it ain't kind. Don't let them change what's real, even if it's me. The last line hit like lightning. Priscilla's hands flew to her mouth. She whispered. He doubted himself. He thought he became the mask. The reel hissed again. A sudden sound of glass breaking jolted through the speakers. Sharp, close, real. Then silence. The recording ended there. Eddie rewound, eyes wide. That glass. Was it the mirror? Miriam's voice shook. Maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe he broke it on purpose. Priscilla closed her eyes. Tears glimmered beneath her lashes. He wasn't just breaking glass, she whispered. He was breaking image. The mystery of the mirror had just deepened, and it was about to bleed into truth. The reel stopped spinning, leaving only the soft click of the player and the sound of breathing no one noticed was their own. Then silence. Eddie exhaled first. That glass, listen again. Miriam replayed the final seconds. The moment before the shatter, Elvis's voice cracked mid-word, almost as if pain became too heavy for melody. The sound wasn't random, carried rhythm, one desperate motion meeting reflection. Back at the Hilton, Priscilla stood before the mirror again, tracing the same crack that split the lower corner. This is where it happened, she whispered. Miriam lifted the flashlight, aligning it with the damage. See how the impact radiates outward? He threw something from this angle, probably from the chair. Eddie nodded slowly. The recording cut right here. Priscilla's voice shook. He wasn't smashing vanity. Her reflection trembled as she spoke. He was smashing who he had to be. The bulbs above the mirror flickered, buzzing softly, as if the room itself remembered. A half-empty champagne bottle still sat on the top shelf. Its label faded, but the date printed on the cork matched the receipt. August 14th, 1977. Every detail aligned. He had recorded, sung, broken the mirror, then left for Memphis. Miriam's eyes moved across the glass. Wait! She wiped a corner clean with her sleeve. Another faint line appeared, barely visible under years of dust. 3 words written low, almost hidden behind the frame. I meant it, Scylla. The breath left the room. Priscilla covered her mouth. For years she'd believed his final words were to an audience. But here, in lipstick and pain, was a private goodbye. Tears blurred her vision. He didn't just sing it. He signed it. Eddie turned away, pretending to photograph details, his own throat tight. Miriam spoke softly. He wanted you to see this. When the world had calmed enough to hear the truth. The truth wasn't grand. It was human. A man at war with his image, asking to be remembered without the crown. Do we ever stop hearing the voices of those who shaped us? Or do they live inside every silence we still protect? Priscilla ran her fingertips along the broken edge, careful not to bleed. The crack caught her reflection in pieces, half hers, half his. Outside, thunder rolled through the desert. Lightning flashed, catching the lipstick words in quick red light. For a moment it looked fresh again, like he had just written it. Eddie stepped toward the door when a knock echoed through the hallway. Security guard, clipboard in hand. Mrs. Presley, he said. You need to see this. He held out a small evidence bag. Inside was a black and white film canister, dust-covered, labeled in fading pen. Mirror room. Miriam frowned. Found where? Maintenance crawlspace, above the bulbs, the guard said. Probably up there since the 70s. Priscilla stared at it, heart pounding. If the reel was sound, this one was sight. Maybe, finally, she would see what he saw in the reflection he tried to destroy. The canister was cold to the touch. Dust flaked off as Priscilla opened it, the metal creaking like a sigh. Inside, a roll of undeveloped black and white film, tightly wound and fragile as memory itself. Eddie took it to the Hilton's media lab, where an old projector waited under a sheet. Hours passed while the negatives were scanned, frame by frame. Each image flickered with the grain of a forgotten night. Then, on the screen, Elvis. He stood alone in the mirror room, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, eyes half-shadowed by the vanity bulbs. The camera, set on a tripod, caught him writing on the glass. One hand moved slow, careful, lipstick in hand. The words took shape. Don't let them change what's real. In the next frame, he stopped writing, staring into his reflection. His mouth opened, as if talking to someone not there. Maybe to her, maybe to himself. A minute later, he lifted the champagne glass, smiled faintly, and threw it. The mirror cracked, the flashbulbs flared, and the final photo caught him mid-smile, shards reflecting a face both broken and calm. Miriam whispered, "He looks peaceful." Priscilla blinked hard. That's the look he gave before every show. Only this time, there was no stage. Local reporters caught the story a week later. The mirror message mystery, Elvis's hidden goodbye. Within days, the Hilton opened the space as a small exhibit. Fans arrived with flowers and letters. Some touched the mirror and left red lipstick kisses along the edges. Others just stood quietly, reading the words. The hotel installed a plaque beneath the glass. Don't let them change what's real. People began tracing the line with their fingers, whispering their own truths under their breath. For some, it became a ritual, an unspoken promise to stay honest in a world built on performance. What does it mean to keep something real when fame, grief, and memory blur everything else? Can one man's last plea become someone else's beginning? Soon, the space transformed. Couples got engaged there. Fans prayed there. Every reflection in that mirror carried pieces of his story, and pieces of their own. Late one evening, a letter arrived from the Presley estate, sealed in cream stationery. Inside, a single page written in Priscilla's elegant hand. It wasn't for the press. It was for the world. The final chapter of Elvis's Mirror would belong to her voice and her truth. The next morning, the exhibit opened its doors to the public. Lines wrapped through the Hilton hallway, quiet but steady, as if people were visiting a chapel instead of a dressing room. At 10 a.m., Priscilla Presley stepped onto the small platform facing the mirror. Flashes burst, then stopped as she lifted a folded sheet of paper. The crowd fell silent. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of decades. Elvis never stopped searching for truth, she read. The mirror didn't show what he lost. It showed what he still believed in. Maybe that's what love is, protecting what's real, even when it hurts. No one moved. The line echoed off the glass, wrapping around every face in the room. Priscilla lowered the paper, eyes glistening. He used to say the lights only mattered if you remembered what they were shining on. I think he finally remembered. A teenager in the front row wiped her eyes. A veteran clutched his scarf from a 1973 show. Somewhere near the back, someone whispered. He finally spoke without music. The crowd began to applaud, soft and respectful. An ovation not for fame, but for honesty. The plaque below the mirror caught the glow from the bulbs. Don't let them change what's real. The reflection of those words stretched across every face in the glass. Priscilla took one last look. The crack still ran through the bottom left corner, but it didn't feel like damage anymore. It felt like proof that truth survives even when perfection doesn't. She turned to leave. Before stepping out, she touched the glass once, finger against the red writing, and whispered, "I kept it real, E." For a second, the lights flickered, catching the lipstick words in a pulse of color. Then the bulbs steadied again, glowing warm and quiet. Outside, reporters crowded her for comment. She smiled gently. "The king left enough songs," she said. "This one wasn't for the radio. It was for the heart." That night, the story traveled across the world. The mirror message, Elvis's final truth. Fan clubs printed the quote on wristbands. Teenagers scribbled it onto notebooks. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, the message stayed simple. Truth doesn't fade when it's written with love. If a single line can survive 45 years of silence, what truth of yours deserves to be seen? If the story moved you, share it with someone who reminds you what's real. Because sometimes the smallest messages, written in lipstick, whispered in pain, end up outliving every song. Fame fades, legends fall quiet, but love, when it's honest, never disappears. It just waits for the right light to make it visible again.